everybody, we're just chatting about how good Zoom is working today. And Brian reckons that it might be because it's Sunday afternoon over there in the States and everybody's out doing stuff and it's, early summer. Brian, I start off, Sunday for you right now. What have you been doing this weekend?
Yesterday, ironically, I worked from 8 in the morning till 5 p.m. on the New Zealand tar footage.
Yes.
Trying to launch the first part of we have a 4-part video series. The first video ended up being 42 minutes long. It's just too long. But so yesterday I went in and chopped it. So I think I'm down to 36 minutes. It's still pretty long, but with each video I make, I kind of feel like a hunting video should have an actual harvest on there or kill, right? Otherwise, because I could just do day by day, like day 1, day 2, day 3. We were there like 12 days. So, but I kind of like the idea of just getting it down to like 4 parts where we had 4 successful hunts and everything in between is just kind of just a little bit of the story on what's going on. But the stock and the harvest and all that is and how we do it, how we did it, the mistakes we made, like putting that into the video, I think is just how I like to roll, Get rid of the fluff.
I've just finished watching one of the boys from New Zealand, Paul Michaels, who I've had on here, and he made his tar video 2 hours, but that was just one video. So
mine would be about 2 hours long. I think they're going to be 4 30-minute parts. And I thought about releasing it all in one or releasing it over the period or all at once, all 4, and you can just binge watch them all. But I'm busy. Like elk season starts in a few weeks. I'm shooting my bow and packing my bags. And last night I took the family to the movies in the evening. And today we went to church. And this evening we're going to hike the mountain together and have a little picnic. And there's that balance between family and work. And it's hard to strike that balance well. And that my goal is, this way I can put a video out this week, and then that gives me a little time to finish the next one before next week, and I'll just put one out each week. Otherwise, you're not getting them for a while if I have to wait till they're all done.
Yeah, nice. It says, is that going to be on a Gritty website or on YouTube?
I'll just dump it on YouTube. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'll obviously link your YouTube channel in the show notes. Mate, you said about going for a walk up the hill with the family. Is that sort of doubling? Are you going to be one of these strange people that people look at and go, why is that guy wearing a pack on a casual hike?
Yeah, pretty much. Like some of these guys show up in like decked out in like, I don't know, Rogue and Under Armour gear, and they're running the hill and they're hiking all, and I'm wearing like hiking boots and a big old pack, and I'm hiking with the kids. And for me, it's dual purpose. It's training and just being in shape for what I actually want to do in a few weeks. I don't take it all too seriously though. The fitness thing, it's just part of my life. I go to the gym a couple days a week and I hike the mountain with a heavy pack a few days a week. It's just part of, being healthy. So I want to feel ready at any time to go to New Zealand Southern Alps and hunt a tar at any time. And that was rough, man.
Yesterday I was hunting and I've been hiking. There's a small mountain just next to us that gives you about 400 meters of elevation, and I've been doing that with my daughter on the front pack. And then, hiking over the weekend, I was thinking I really need to start doing that with my hunting boots on, because that extra weight around your feet makes all the difference.
It does. It's a little different, and wherever I'm going to have calluses and all that, I want those now. So I'm not like picking them up later. So I try to mimic it as best I can, what it's going to actually be like when I'm out there chasing elk or doing whatever it is, you know.
Yeah, man. And so you've got plenty of videos of you guys in the gym, smashing it out, dynamic lifts. How do you reckon that dynamic, high intensity sort of stuff flows through for those big efforts on the hill?
Yeah, you know, I started doing CrossFit, I want to say 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So before that, I just always would lift weights, you know, hike, run, bike. I rode my bike to work an hour each way every day for like 4 years. When I used to be an accountant in downtown Portland, you know, when I lived in Oregon, you know, I always feel like, you know, activity is important. But when I started doing CrossFit style workouts where it was just random every day, everything from pull-ups to barbell work to gymnastics work, man, I felt like I grew 20 years younger. I and on the mountain, you know, I don't think that, so I experimented a little bit where I only did like your kind of CrossFit style workouts for general physical preparedness. And I would do those workouts 5 days a week. I'd follow the program at the local gym where I would go hang out, and it was like family, and you all work out together. So it's shared suffering. So you like bond with everyone there, and you walk away from the workouts feeling like broken, but then you have to go back the next day because all your buddies and stuff are expecting you to show up, and you don't want to be the one that's too weak to show up. So it really did help me push my fitness to another level, having like sort of a family almost there. And they were like a family for me for sure. And so I loved it for so many reasons. But I think that when I actually went into the mountains and started hiking at elevation and carrying a heavy pack and going 17 miles in a day or more, CrossFit alone didn't do the trick. I mean, I could do all of it, but it was soul crushing. Where now I probably do a CrossFit workout 2 days to 3 days a week. And then I hike the mountain, the actual sport specific activity I want to engage in 3 days a week or more. And sometimes I'll run the mountain, like trail run it with, you know, my tennies, and I'll run up there and run back down, time it a couple days a week, and I'll mix it up. But it's amazing hiking up a mountain with a heavy pack 3 days a week, maybe 2 to 3 miles round trip. How much of that added to my CrossFit type workouts dramatically changes my experience in the mountains. It's like, I don't have to hike 10 or 20 miles, or I don't have to do 5 even to have a base level of fitness so that when I hit the mountains, I can just go and feel great. The difference between doing CrossFit only is that I just was so beat down, tired, and I would get sore and stay sore throughout the week, and climbing a hill sucked the whole time. Now, when I climb a hill, like in New Zealand, I'm just like, it's just part of every day. There's nothing unique about it. I do it 3-4 times a week, and your body adapts to it. And so, but I will never walk away from doing the all around fitness in the gym, because being able to do 30 or 40 one-legged squats or pistols, though, that's the difference between hurting your knee, you know, hiking down some of these canyons and stuff with a heavy pack, and not hurting it. It's the difference having that mobility and the strength for doing like overhead lunges. I don't know, like I don't get injured. I'm almost 45. I don't get injured. And that's why I do all that stuff. It's for strength and for injury prevention, for strength conditioning. It has really little to do with the sport specific activity I want to do as far as performance goes. It's more like, I don't want to get hurt. And I feel like it increases bone density. It increases my ligament and tendon strength. It increases my muscular functions. It just builds that base that then I can really stand on when I do the sport specific activity.
Yeah, mate. And I think that's what's really starting to escalate with the hunting world and the strength and conditioning world. And you've got guys like Brett Soren, starting up his little tactical house, and there's a few ex military guys that are into the tactical training, and then also into hunting, and the two worlds is colliding, and of course someone that everybody should know about, Cameron Haynes, running all the time, but then equally so in the gym, and he's just been kitted out with a Silex,
The
little bit of kit as well.
like I find like I'll go out with some guys and we'll hang out and they're fit, but they'll tweak a knee, twist an ankle, hurt their shoulder. They'll have to be out because they have some kind of shoulder surgery shooting a heavy compound bow or trad bow or whatever the case may be. And they got to pick a pack up and now they've got a hernia. And, it's like the list goes on of guys that might have good cardio conditioning and decent cardio conditioning, and they might be able to carry a pack a lot of miles. But what happens when that pack is beyond your normal load? You slip, you fall, or if you don't have the strength through a full range of motion, I think it's really easy to jack something up. And so I think for those reasons, plus, just to prevent injury, but plus, I just feel good in life in general, being active. I think gymnastics are fun. Trying to figure out how to do rings and handstand walk. I'm not good at any of that stuff, but I love playing in the gym, doing it, and Cam has his more bis and tries and, his kind of curls and he and I have talked a bunch of times. Cam does not like to do any leg workouts at all because he runs so much. And he's like, back when I did squats and deadlifts and, a lot of that stuff that I do, he's like, my thighs got so big, they would rub and then they'd chafe and bleed when I did races, And so I don't really care. If you're Jocko Willink, you're mostly rolling on the floor and you do the same workout 5 days a week, like the same thing every week. Well, that works for Jocko. He loves jujitsu. And so I think everybody, I don't care what it is, do what gets you excited and gets you outdoors, but try to do as much varied as you can and figure out what works for you.
Yeah, and I love the concept of bulletproofing things. And you said about the ligaments. I tried to, stupidly run the hill and blew up my knee, and then sort of gave it a rest. And then I was, again, that same place that I went over the weekend, walking down the hill, the knee was not liking me very much. And some of that unilateral lunging sort of stuff, there's a great guy out there, knees over toes guy. He's keen on basketball jumping and that sort of explosive power and absorbing and landing. And yeah, just a few lunges, a few little sort of unilateral squats, and the knee strength came back not straight away, but a couple of weeks of that. And yeah, no trouble at all when I walked a massive amount of distance yesterday. And yeah, I feel sweet, and the legs feel good today. It's really, really good. Good, like I say, good feeling to be able to just go out there and do it, man.
Yeah, and I think some people, sadly, a lot of guys that are my age and getting older, they gave up 5-10 years ago on like really pushing themselves physically. And I think that's a shame. Especially in today's modern world, we can live so much longer and have a much better quality of life than we used to. The wild game that I take and I eat on a regular basis, added to the physical activity and clean eating and all of that stuff, just I think gives one a much better quality of life outside of hunting. I mean, hunting is definitely a deep part of my life, but it's not my whole life. And there's so much that happens outside of it that I get intense pleasure out of. And, if you take away someone's health, let's say they get cancer or they get, some kind of, illness or disease, or they get in a severe accident, a car accident, and now they're crippled in some way or they're sick in some way. And that's a hard way to go through life. And I think much of the time people do the same thing to themselves in
Mm.
effect, but do it slowly over a 10-year period, gaining a pound a month, for 4 years. Now you're 40, 50 pounds heavier than you should be. And it was insidious. It was slow. It was just incremental, just a little bit at a time. So much so that the first year it was 10 pounds of extra weight. The next year it's 10 more pounds. And before you know it, by a war of attrition, they have lost their health. And it's a shame because it doesn't have to be that way. I feel bad for those people that lose their health in some traumatic, injurious way or by some disease, and you think about what they would give to have it back.
Mm.
And yet so many people, and more I'd say in America than in New Zealand, so many of us do a poor job. We just give up. We give up our wellness and our health, and there's no excuse for that. No one took it from you. You gave it away, and you can get it back too.
Yeah, no, mate. Unfortunately, we're close on the heels of the States here in New Zealand, and my job as an optometrist, I see plenty of people that are in their older years, and the shopping list of medications and injuries, and you start to unpack where things are, and to try bring, like you can undo it, but to try and bring it back, it's a long story, and a lot of justifications going on, and yeah, it's difficult. But you mentioned your family there, and I sort of try live by the concept of no dad bods allowed. Is that sort of something that keeps you motivated to stay in shape? Because to be able to, if they run at you, catch them and that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah, my middle daughter is super active and very fit and craves exercise. Actually, like she's kind of like me, where if she sits around too much, she's got to go like punish herself physically and run up a hill, or she'll design her own workout. And she's like 13, and she'll just beat herself up. But she has some intense conditioning in her gymnastics classes that are 3 hours long, and they just torture these girls, and I love it. My oldest, though, she's more academic, but has always liked strength training, and she's really strong. She does the CrossFit stuff with me, and again, going back to do what gets you excited. Caitlin really loves to lift heavy weight. She loves to get under a barbell. She loves to just crush that stuff, and she's stronger than most boys her age, way stronger. And so but that's what gets her excited. Now I try to make her do a little cardio, a few days a week, and she hates it. She does it, she hates it. But more importantly, I like that there's something she does like, and she'll get out and do it. So we'll get her doing that. And then once she's done that, she'll do a little cardio just to please me. And my youngest loves dance, and she's in dance like for hours a week, and she's very active in that. And again, they have some conditioning and things like that push them. And the rule at our house is you have to be enrolled in some sport of some kind. And I don't care what it is, you decide. Abby always flirts with wanting to quit gymnastics because it's torture and it's really hard and it's mentally difficult. I mean, I can't imagine trying to do some kind of like cartwheel on a balance beam. Like, I mean, just the thought of crushing my balls like that just kind of it's intimidating, right? And so I'm not. I can see why there's a lot of fear in gymnastics. I think flipping off of something, and I mean, you're talking serious, physical feats going on there. And so at times she thinks about just doing track instead, because then she just has to run, and I'm like, it's up to you. If you want to quit gymnastics and do track, I don't care, but you have to do one or the other. And so far she's stayed with the gymnastics, and she's really good. So I just think it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, youth today, I grew up in the sticks, and we caught crawdads and built tree houses, and we lived in a trailer. We lived in a tent for like a year. My mom and dad had bought 20 acres. We just lived in a tent out there on it. And then from there, they started to build a house. We lived in a trailer, little tiny little like 20-foot trailer for couple years, and then we got a real house kind of out there, and but there was no TV, there was no cell phones, there was no electronic anything, and our life was spent outside, and we were really active, and we were just healthier in that way. So I think nowadays, especially we don't live in the same kind of environment, and I find that my kids, you know, I end up, you know, if keeping them in sports if they're going to be active. I wish we lived, and we have at times lived in the sticks a little more and in the boondocks, but just work and stuff hasn't allowed that. So they've grown up more in a, city kind of environment.
Yeah, looking back on my childhood, I was a swimmer, and you talk about those, long hours and commitment to doing something hard. And I've talked about it a few times. I went to a swimming camp once where we did, for the first time, train 3 times a day, and they were 2.5 hour sessions. And I hit the wall, and my coach made me finish the set, and it's probably the greatest thing I've ever done, not being able to move and taking ages to do 400 meters, which would usually take, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes. But, you said about your daughter's a bit like you. She doesn't like to sit down. She likes to get out. How did being an accountant, how did you balance that part of your life?
Well, I've always been doing 2 or 3 things at the same time.
Yeah.
So when I was in college, I owned a roofing and siding company all through college. So I did construction, and we built houses and stuff. Later, after I graduated from college and I got a degree in accounting and information systems, I went to work doing more audit work, both IT security and regular, like I guess, business process audits. And it worked well. And then I started using the money I made from that. I built a tree house that my wife and I moved into, and we lived in for like 10 years. And that was simply because we were cheap, and I didn't see the point in buying a real house. So we just built a tree house on my parents' property, and we lived in that. And she has a degree in interior design, so she helped build it. She was working, I was working, we had a couple kids. In the meantime, we had all this income from the college degree and the construction company, and we bought lots of property, and started to develop it, built over, we'd subdivide oversized lots, and then we'd build houses on that and sold them. And we put all our money into one big project. It was to build like a bunch of row homes in this block, and we'd have a couple million when we were done. And then the economy crashed, the housing market fell out. We couldn't get a construction loan. We were leveraged too much. We put too much, everything into that one project. It was 2008, and everything crashed here. And we ended up selling those lots and just barely getting some of our original money back. So, I was always kind of trying things, making money, hustling on the side, and then failing and trying something else. And some things you do okay, and some you don't. And eventually, as the kids got older, after the housing crash, I just said, you know what, I'm just going to relax a little bit and mostly work on one career, one thing. I kind of got, I got slapped hard with that real estate market in the US at that time. So, and I've been running hard for years. So for like 8 years, I just started put myself into my career. And I read the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss about halfway through that. And he talked about, working from home, and working, becoming more efficient. And so I messed around with that. And his whole premise was, get more effective in your day-to-day, deliver more at work, and negotiate more free time so that you could do other things that you're interested in. And so that's what I did. I read the book, followed the plan. Within about a year, I was working from home 3 days a week. And by working from home, I mean, I did nothing at home. I worked 2 days at the office, and I was able to accomplish in 2 days at the office what I was doing in 5 days at the office before, following kind of his tricks and stuff. And I was just like, at first, the newfound freedom, all I did was go to the gym, beach, hunt, hang out when, like, on my spare time. I always had to have a cell phone with me just because I'd answer an email here or there through on the days I was at home. But for the most part, things just sailed along. I had all these automatic processes in place, and it worked really well, and it was great for a long time. And then I got bored, sort of like Groundhog's Day, where I just was like, eh, there was nothing fulfilling about it, but I had a lot of money and a lot of free time. And that's when I started. I went ahead and got a new computer to film hunts and like edit them and make movies, and was messing around with that for fun. And after, I did that, and I could because I had all that spare time because my job I had built that way. But I spent less and less time going to the gym and the beach and more time like learning a new skill. And then I put the film in the Full Draw Film Tour here in the US, and people liked it. And I started doing a couple of podcast episodes, and then it blew up. And within a year, I was at a point where I had enough income from companies that wanted to support the podcast that I could actually quit my other job and make less, quite a bit less, but make enough that I was okay with it. And at the time, my wife had just, at the time all this was going on, she was battling cancer, and all the money and the free time and stuff really didn't have that much meaning anymore in the face of cancer and her potentially losing her. And I, all my values and, everything I had been working for completely changed. I had no debt because we had worked really hard on that. We had a bunch of money in savings, and I was in a position where I could actually quit. We had so much savings and no debt that I didn't need a huge income, and we could quit, and I could actually do the podcast full time and see what happens with it. And first year within a couple of years, I got to the point where I made more now than I did before. And I'm doing something that I'm really passionate about. So in some ways it's like the American dream. It's not without its stress and its frustrations, and it's been hard to manage all of that. But at the same time, I get to spend weeks and weeks I don't know how many days I hunted last year or was out in the wilderness unplugged, but it was a lot. And that much time out there really puts life into perspective when you come back.
Mm.
And I just think we're meant to live out there. We're not meant to live in the city like we do. We're not meant to live in civilization the way we do. At least I'm not. So as far as balancing it goes, I don't think I do a very good job. I'm either like full into hunting, or I'm podcasting, or I'm filmmaking, or I'm all family time, but I don't feel like I balance it well at all.
Nice.
But I find a way.
That's a hell of a story, man. And I guess that's one of my aims of my podcast, is to just show people that things can be done. And I like that you said there, if when you're going after your passion, things go wrong, and you have to take stock again. Mate, something you brought up there was when you got that computer, and you had to learn how to make videos and use the programs. What is it like for you doing something new and getting that beginner mindset back?
Well, when I turned 19, I went on a mission for my church. I'm an LDS, and I went to Japan, Okayama, Japan, and I worked out of Hiroshima for 2 years. And so it was like sink or swim. I was in an apartment with 3 dudes who didn't speak an ounce of English. Like, they were all Japanese, hardcore. And, it's funny, like, it seems like every Japanese person can speak some English. I swear I got stuck with the only 3 dudes who cared nothing for English, who flunked it through high school and college. And so we're hanging out in this apartment, and it was, you figure out the language or you don't. And I remember teaching myself Japanese. No one was there to teach me. I had books, and I took notes, and I was motivated. I wanted to be able to communicate. And English wasn't an option, and I truly want to learn the language and speak to the people. And I taught myself Japanese, and that from that point on, throughout my whole life, I believe that, especially in today's day and age with YouTube and books and online classes, you can teach yourself to do almost anything. Like, college is a joke. There's really no need for university, for a million reasons. You can teach yourself everything, you name it. So, um, I think I grew up, fortunately, in a generation just on the edge where we were just starting to get, resources to teach ourselves things. And when I picked up the new computer, for years I remember getting my first Apple computer, and it had iMovie on it. Came with it, and we filmed some hunts, my buddies and I, and then we made a little cheesy movie out of it. And then we had a barbecue at our buddy's house after elk season was over, and then we'd force our family and friends and wives to watch crappy movies of our hunts. And we did that every year for like 4 or 5 years. And we were trying to be photographers, and I'd take the photos from the hunts and I'd put them into a book, and you could type them on Blurb. I could type them into the online app, and then it would actually ship me a hard copy book of the stories of the hunt with the photos. And I'd give those out to the guys at the end of the barbecue, and it was like, so each year I was getting into this point where I was making some cheesy movies and then giving them the books. And it was just a hobby, and it was for fun. But like I said, my wife got cancer, and my ideas changed, and I decided, you know what, I really want to get better at this. And I have the time. I had the free time to indulge in learning something. My kids were at a certain age. I was working at home all the time. And I was like, I'm going to dive into this. And so I remember going, what is it, lynda.com, and downloading courses. It was like $50 for a course or 20. And I was getting them off of like Ripple Effects, I think is one of them, websites. I mean, this is so weird because now there's all kinds of options out there. But at the time you had to kind of search, and there were some online courses. I downloaded them all. And I had one computer open with like Final Cut, and I bought the app and the computer and all. I remember my wife's like, you want to spend like $3,000 on a computer, and then you want to buy like $8,000 in cameras, and you don't even know how to do this. And I'm like, I don't care. We have the money, and this is what I wish. And she's like, what are you going to do with it? I'm like, I'm going to make movies. For what? For myself. And she's like, whatever. And so I bought all that stuff, and I literally was like watching the video over here and then making the video over here. And I just started to teach myself. I feel like if you want to learn any skill, you got to know your limits. Like, I've learned over time that I have an aptitude for certain things, and some things I really suck at. And I could spend a lot of time teaching myself how to do something I really suck at, and I'll probably still suck at it even after I've learned. But things that you're naturally gifted at and you dive into, they can be deeply rewarding, because I think you're gonna pick it up. You're gonna pick it up pretty quick. And it wasn't like I had to find motivation to do it. I just wanted it that bad. And so I think, man, we live in a world today where you name it, figure it out. If you're interested in it. And I ended up calling Cody Kellum over at Born and Raised Outdoors.
Cool.
And they lived a couple hours from me in Oregon. And Cody was doing the Full Draw film tour, and he was doing videos for Born and Raised Outdoors. And I said, hey, I got a video. I'm just some guy, and I've made a video. I'd love to sit down with you and learn some things. And he said, yeah, send it to me. So then he watched it, and he called me back, and he said, hey, yeah, we're going to do a weekend filmmaking class. Do you want to come? And I'm like, yeah. So I went down to that, met a whole ton of people, that including like South Cox and others. And we sat down, and I made movies that weekend, and I took all the stuff I had learned and, learned even more. And that really motivated me to like make a movie for a film tour, for a film event, and that kicked that thing off, and it took off from there. But yeah, I'm not afraid to like dive into something and completely fail doing it. You know, I went to New Zealand and I'm like, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, maybe I completely fail on this trip, but you know, who cares? It's all part of that adventure.
Nice. Was that your first time over here?
No, so the first time I went over there, I got an invite to go over there with Mountain Ops. So
Nice.
Mountain Ops, Casey and Jordan, who are good friends of mine, and I work out of the Mountain Ops headquarters here. They're like, hey, we're going to New Zealand, and we're gonna hunt tar. And I had been watching people for years hunt tar in the mountains, and it just people always talk about the stag, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, stag. They're kind of like elk, but different. I don't know, but the goat species, the tar, that like I've always been fascinated by the mountain and the mountain goats and the mountain species. And I don't know, it's just something about it. It's cool. And so I wanted to experience it. And here in the United States, if you want to hunt, or Canada, if you want to hunt mountain goat or bighorn sheep, you better be rich. I mean, you can't afford, you might draw a goat tag in a lower 48 state. I've never drawn one, and I've been applying since I was like 18, you know, so more than 25 years. So I think it's a tough thing to experience here if you want to, and if you're into it. Elk and deer are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, why would I go to New Zealand to just hunt a type of elk when I can do tons of that here? But the goat's not accessible to me, where tar are, you know, that's something I could afford to do. So I really wanted to experience that. And so Casey and Jordan are like, come on, let's go. We're just going to go for 4 days. It's short, and it'll be cool. So I went down there with Duncan from Cordrona Safaris.
Yep.
And
He's
Duncan
a great guy.
he was super cool and super gracious. And he put us up in one of the lodges there. And we went out, and I went out with Sam Manson, and we chased goats. And Sam was just a stud. He's just a fun, awesome dude, tough guy. And it was really fun. It was like hunting with buddies, you know. And we chased tar up there for 4 days, and I just got hooked. And so that was my first time. First of all, it took me 2 days to get there and 2 days to fly home, because it's like the longest trip on the planet. It was
Did you
like
have to go far Australia as well?
I was like 4 days of travel and 4 days of hunting. It just was way too short. I felt like I spent most of my time on an airplane. So this second time when I went, I'm like, okay, I'm doing it all on my own, and I'm going to fly there, and I'm going to stay like 12 days in country. And we did, and it was freaking awesome. So the first time was too short, and I just got a tiny taste, and it was a totally different experience. You know, where we flew, we took a chopper ride in for our drop camp for the first 8 days in the Southern Alps, and this on the second trip, and just getting dropped off and left there was a whole different kind of feeling. And it was late in the year, and so there was like 2 feet of snow had just dumped, and it was just a whole nother level of rugged, you know.
Yeah, and I saw one of your posts. You contacted Remy Warren because he'd been through where you were before,
Yes.
or something like that.
Yeah, so it was interesting because we called different people and talked to different friends, and people were gracious and reached out to me through social that are from New Zealand. And I got lots of people kind of helping us out with ideas and places to go. And one of the people that was really helpful was Zion Pilgrim.
Yeah, I know his page. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Zion was really cool. He's been on my podcast back when the DOC was going to do the charcoal.
Yeah.
You know, we did a show together. He was we were able to do a couple shows, But Zion was going to help me land on the West Coast somewhere. But the weather just was, it was so late. I think we hunted in June, and it was just gnarly. So we decided to change plans and go to the Southern Alps instead. And we just got a hold of a helicopter outfit and said, hey, we want to get dropped off somewhere. And there was a couple of places on a map, and we picked one. And then he dropped us off. I mean, it was pretty simple. It was like we rented a car, and driving on the other side of the road was awkward. And that took like at least 4 hours to get the hang of, maybe more like 2 days. And then we flew down and got on the chopper and got dropped off and had a wonderful trip. It was super eye-opening, and we learned a lot. New Zealand's mountains can kill you. There's just it's just, they're dangerous. There's just no way around it. And we found ourselves in some dangerous situations multiple times. Just, you're hunting, you're in the moment. I don't know. There were places we went where, going back, I won't do what we did last time. I won't do it again the same way. I mean, we needed full on crampons and ice axes and ropes and stuff for some of the stuff we did. And once I'm getting into that kind of situation, that's just too rich for my blood. I don't need to die trying to kill a goat. Like I'm good with that. So next time I go, I'll be much more circumspect, more careful, and we've learned a lot, But we kind of experienced two different hunts on the trip. We did one that was that kind of drop in, just random thing in rugged conditions. And then we talked to Remy halfway through the trip. Well, toward 2/3 through the trip, we talked to Remy, and he gave us like 6 spots to check out. And it's funny, like every single one of them is listed on the DOC website. Like you can just go there and it actually says go to these places. But it was nice to have Remy like talk to us about, some of the more favorite spots on that list. But none of them are not public record. Like everything that he mentioned, was right there. But in access points, they just tell you where to drive and park. I mean, it's crazy. The service that's there. And so that was really neat. And the hut system was mind blowing. You can just not have that here in the United States. So all of it was a cool adventure. And, but we ended up driving to a spot and hiking in to an area, and there were no, cliffs. There was no, like, you're going to die any moment. There was hardly any snow, and there was billions of tar. So it was like, and it was funny because we'd run into other hunters coming out from there, and we're looking for them. Do they have optics? Do they have backpacks? I'm just kind of curious their hunting style and their experience. And there were a bunch of Kiwis that were coming out, and mostly young guys, maybe early 20s or younger even.
Probably on uni holidays or something.
Yeah. And they're I couldn't see binoculars on any of them. There was like 4 groups that came out. I'm like, and they were all carrying, like, one of them was carrying a stag, like, and they just cut the back half off, like right at the waist, and he's just carrying it out over his shoulders, like no pack. He's got the hooves on it and the hair and everything, and like he didn't break it down at all. He just cut it and just slung it over his shoulder, and he's hiking it out, and he's got a gun over his. And I'm like, what is the obsession with carrying out the animal whole around here and no backpacks?
We actually turned the animal into a backpack.
Yeah, that just it's just not comfortable. I don't get it, but it's every magazine, every photo. Like, it was funny. It's definitely a, it's what you do over there. But they left tons of the meat, which is really foreign to us over here. First of all, it's illegal, and you lose your hunting license and your weapon and stuff like that. But over there, it's like, yeah, we shot a couple stags and we grabbed a hind quarter and, and we're going to eat it this weekend with our college buddies. And you're like, and you left everything else. But we were asking them, did you see any tar? And they're like, no, there's no tar here. Like, they're miles away. We sat up and glassed. We saw billions of tar with our optics. And it just, and that happens here too, where we'll go out and guys will be like, there's not any elk anywhere. And we're into elk all day. And so there's definitely a learning curve to it. And if you're just kind of walking around and meandering, and if you're in where the stag are, you're probably not where the tar are, so, it's a different kind of thing. But it was interesting to run into other hunters. And we were really kind of like, oh man, Remy, why'd you send us here? Like, these other groups, there's not a single tar. They're like, no, they buggered off and went off to this other mountain range in the wintertime. We're like, why? And they said, oh, the snow, and I'm like, we only found them in the snow in the other place. And so it was pretty, but my point is that was so easy to do. You land, you walk in, and you're having an adventure and you're chasing tar. And we saw way more tar there in those grasslands than we did in the mountain Alps. But those mountain Alps are alluring because just the rugged nature of it and just the tar up in those cliffs. It was, I don't know, I can't decide which one I liked better. But the other way was bow hunting. The grasslands was bow hunting gold. Those cliffs, we were shooting tar from 200 yards trying to get them to fall off a cliff so we could get them in the bluffs below because they were not gettable up there. So totally, I mean, it was like two different worlds, two different scenarios of hunting, but for the same species. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I guess in those main areas, those ones that you see on the sort of dock website, if they're under helicopter pressure, you see a lot more scrub bulls, and even you say about deer and tar and not in the same place. There's a spot that Maiden and I have gone a couple of times, and you sort of walking through the deer country, and then you see these little rocky outcrops. And I remember one day going, man, it'd be great if some animals walked across. Sure enough, it's about 6 or 7. It was a bachelor group walked around. Unfortunately for us, it was our early days, and we made the absolute rookie error of we're shooting on a 30-degree angle, and we aimed high, and so of course we both shot over the shoulders of these animals. Got back, I think even in the hut that we went and stayed the night, there was a magazine that sort of had about shooting on an angle, aim low, and it was like, it would have been useful to know just 3 hours earlier. Mate, you said about how the mountains can kill you, and there's plenty of cases of that around. And been in contact with Adam Greentree, try to get him on, and hopefully we can do that to hear his sort of side of the story, because twice now he's got into a little bit of grief. And that's, I guess, with the tar cull and finding value in our animals, because as they're classified as pests over here, and despite Doc's great efforts in making things accessible, they're also under the pump from various political angles that they need to get rid of all these inverted commas pests. And that's sort of something that's been discussed in a number of New Zealand hunting podcasts, is how do we bring value to our animals? And also, you said the first time you went with an outfitter, and the next time you sort of did it yourself, and contacted a number of outfitters, guys like Remy Warren as well, coming here doing it by himself. How, what's your perspective on what New Zealand needs to do? Because obviously it's great that you guys come here. It's great that you guys, promote our animals and bring value to them. But then at the same time, the flip side is people die on the mountains, and sort of New Zealand hunters are scratching their heads of, how do we make sure that these people come here are safe, and from an economic perspective, that the outfitters aren't missing out. What's your perspective on that?
Man, it's a couple of questions there. On the safety thing, I really struggle with that, because um, I'm not going to jump out of an airplane. I'm not interested in doing what Andy Stump does, and I'm not going to jump off a cliff in a fly suit, and it's not my thing. Now, or paragliding or anything like that.
Yeah.
But do I want, and it's it's dangerous. People die all the time doing it. Do I want to stop other people from doing it because it's dangerous? No, it's his life. If he wants to risk it jumping off a cliff, I think he should be able to decide that he wants to risk it jumping off. It's his thing. If a guy wants to go and hunt in Wyoming and he wants to do it on federal public land here in the United States, and it's designated wilderness, I think a guy should be able to do it. Now, Wyoming, ironically, is the only state in the United States where it's illegal to go and hunt the wilderness without a guide. I think that's BS. I think it's garbage. And their reason for that is for safety. That way you're required to use a guide if you're not from Wyoming. But if you're not from Montana, you can go on wilderness and hunt there. They have grizzlies. They have all the dangerous stuff. They have all the same thing. I don't like regulating people's safety. If someone wants to go out and experience and risk their life, do some mountaineering, I think they should be able to make that choice. It's their life. So I don't like the idea of regulating for safety per se. I think that, educating people is good. I think having, I thought that, things like, classes or even publish content to help people understand the dangers of going out is important. Education is important. I just don't like the idea of, I guess, regulating for safety. So that said, when it comes to, when it comes to valuing wildlife in New Zealand, you guys are unique in the sense that New Zealand evolved in isolation for millions of years, and so your species on your island are so unique to just New Zealand. It's really mind-blowing. And now to have so many invasive species live there and threaten that ecosystem. I made a joke the other day. I was talking to my brother and I was like, you know what? New Zealand's like a virgin that's been dumped in like a prison system, like without any protection. Like, evolving in isolation like it has, there's animals that just didn't co-evolve with some other ruthless species on the planet that got all the protections and abilities to, to withstand something, for example, a possum. But like in your country, those animals didn't co-evolve with a possum. You put a possum on there and they have no defenses against it. So I understand, like, you guys have a really, really tough road ahead because the world has become a global place. And yet New Zealand didn't evolve in a way to cope with that kind of reality. And so, the amount that you have to spend to manage these invasive species and what you have to do to protect the existing species that are on the verge of extinction or that are struggling with it. And it's a tall order. And I don't know if it can be achieved. I think it's a noble thing to do. And it's something that New Zealand is actively engaged in and should be. I think we should be in the business of preserving species now that we have the potential to do so as a human species. But I don't know where to begin there. I can say this, that I think that it's a political football. It's a joke just to say that we need to eliminate the tar in order to protect our native tussocks and grasslands and other species, while you have some, 40 million sheep or something running across the country. It's just, that's just bullshit. You can't sit there and have it both ways. You can't tell me that you're worried about the environment and then have 40 million domestic species tromping on the same land. And you're worried about what, 30,000 tar? 60,000 tar. It's like, it's not scratching the surface of an environmental danger in you know, when you put it next to the other. So if you're not going to regulate the domestic species and their impact, it seems like it feels completely disingenuous for the government to attack tar as it seems more like, you know, a party that's trying to virtue signal and gain votes based on some kind of noble ideal, but is really not concerned about the reality. It's sort of like in America, where you have these politicians that say we need to adopt this Green New Deal and save the planet, when our carbon emissions is nothing compared to something like, let's say, China. So why aren't we working to work with China to reduce carbon emissions? Because even if we did all the things that we're talking about doing in the United States and bankrupting our country to do it, we still wouldn't actually affect the condition at all, hardly at all. So I just don't find it a genuine interest when you have these groups that are trying to eliminate tar. I don't feel like it's coming from an honest place. What can be done? I feel like, you know, in the United States, an animal that is worth money is safe. Like, period. If it doesn't have a monetary value, it's really tough for an animal to have a future. You know, bighorn sheep are 50 grand if you want to hunt one here, you know, on a guided sort of hunt. And man, that makes sheep worth a lot. Like, people really would like to see bigger sheep herds and more sheep when people will pay that much for a hunt. So I think assigning value to wildlife is important. And that, what shocks me is, in New Zealand, you got to have a fishing license to fish for brown trout, but you don't have to have a hunting license to hunt. And I look at it, I'm like, okay, when I was there with Ryan, we took home a chamois and we took home 4 tar, 2 tar apiece. And so I look at that. Actually, it was 5 tar. But I look at that and I'm like, well, in the States, as a non-resident, I would probably end up paying at a minimum $400 to $500 per tag. So for every bull tar I take, I'd be spending, let's say, $500, $450 for a tag. For a sheep tag, or goat tag rather, it's a lot more. It's like $1,200 or $1,000, $800. So Ryan and I, coming into New Zealand, we would gladly happily pay our $400 to $800 for a tag. And we would certainly be more, I guess, circumspect about which one we take if we have to pay for a tag for each one, you know. And maybe it's just a hunting license you get. And that hunting license, though, also sort of would, if you're required to get a hunting license in New Zealand, you would then demonstrate some proficiency with a weapon. And you may, in order to hunt and get your hunting license, you need to take a class on safety in the mountains and mountaineering. And there you would have to pass some basic level of proficiency as far as being safe in New Zealand's rugged country. So I think that, man, just implementing a North American model of conservation in New Zealand would go a long way. I mean, you would have a hunting license process. The government would get paid through those licenses, and for each tag, I mean, Ryan and I would have spent a couple $1,000s on tags that would go straight to the management of tar, right? And same thing for other species. And then you would know what your harvest rates are in some of those areas, and you could manage that wildlife. You can say, well, we need this many tags, and you know, and I don't know that I just know that it works here. I don't know, you know, that it works in New Zealand, but it seems like you have fishing licenses. So why wouldn't you have a hunting license and a process for managing game? And like I said, I would be happy to pay it. Now, if you're a resident of some states and you want to hunt, I don't know, deer, you know, it might be $25 for the tag. So it's not like New Zealanders would have to pay a ton of money for a license and tag, right? Pass that expense on to the non-residents, you know. And if you have prefectures or different cities or areas or unit boundaries, it's like, well, you're a resident in this spot, but you're not a resident in this spot, you know, you pay a little bit more fee than the person who lives in this local region. And that's how we do it with each state here in the United States. Each state has its own, you know, I pay out of state non-resident fees. Now, if I'm going to Canada, I got to pay not only like non-resident fees, I also have to pay alien fees, you know, as a non-citizen of Canada. So to me, it's like, man, with all the hunters that want to come to New Zealand and experience this, I think most hunters are on board with the concept of game management and on the concept of conservation. I think we all want to give back. And so in the form of a tag and a license, I think we would gladly pay for those. And I don't know what the statistics are, what the number of non, you know, of alien hunters that come to New Zealand are. And I don't know what that revenue stream could look like, but I suspect it could be quite large. And, you know, your model seems more, and I don't know a lot. This is just me. You asked the question, so here it goes.
I'm keen to hear your opinion. That's right.
You know, you have the outfitting and guiding business, and that's a totally different animal from the do-it-yourself kind of hunt that I just did. Right now, I think I can tell people about how to do that hunt on their own, and a lot of guys are going to try and do it. And then there's going to be guys that have no interest in doing what I did, none whatsoever. It was too hard. There's too many unknowns, and the animal's not big enough, and all kinds of things, right? And those guys are going to be happy to go and pay for a different kind of opportunity where they get to stay in a lodge and they get an outfitter and a guide, and that person, they're looking for a different experience. And I think you can have both in the country. You can still have a license and tag required for each person, and then at the same time you have your guiding and outfitting business. I don't see how they can't coexist. We have it here in the United States that way, and it coexists here. But to me, if you actually treated the animals like they were being managed and they had economic value, then you would, you know, as far as from a state sanctioned point of view, then I think that you would have a situation where the society would value that animal more.
I like what you said about locality, not having to sort of fund the area, and I guess that's, you know, you spoke about New Zealanders coming out with hindquarters or just back straps or just a head and all that sort of stuff, and that goes to the fact that many New Zealand hunters, and there's somewhere around 150,000 of them also, just, you know, a lot of them get out hunting every weekend, and then I guess that would be the pushback of that. Now I can't go out every weekend, but that's where maybe a licensing system, you know, we don't have a season because they're classed as a pest, but a licensing system means that you show some sort of, you know, level of competency to go hunt, and then you're into it, and then that creates a pathway. And, you know, one of the things that we've been talking about on many of the podcasts is that people need to join New Zealand Deerstalkers Association, so that those 160,000 are on a page. You know, there's not 20,000 or 6,000, might even be that low, people that are on a page. And so when the political football comes out, you can go, oh, well, hang on a minute.
Right.
We're here, and we're a good proportion of the country. You're having a massive effect on us. And then also when you talk about that preparedness to pay, and thankfully with the last government, the Fiordland Wapiti, same as your elk, they were donated by Theodore Roosevelt back in the day. They have a foundation, and they are our sole herd of special interest. And there's a seeker up here where I am now in Hawke's Bay that, been pushing and pushing to become a herd of special interest. We've got pockets of Roosa, pockets of Samba, the TAR. The TAR Foundation really kicked into life last year, and they're probably next on the list to get into this herd of special interest. But currently, the political football is saying no way. They're a pest, and it's just such a shame that we can't come together on that. So yeah, I think a licensing for locals, and then I don't know what we do about internationals, but and then our challenge is who manages it, which we're just not prepared for. But of course, we've got short memories. Our history of hunting is our last 50 years, and prior to that, it was a license, a tagged system, and we forget that's how it all started out. So yeah, no, that's really good input, and it's good to get an outsider's perspective.
Because I think in the United States, for instance, in certain states you can get a duck stamp and a license to hunt ducks, and then you have a daily bag limit. You can only take so many ducks per day. And so it's like, why not do that? If especially with a lot of locals that get out every weekend, that get out and they hunt and they get after it, having a system where people get out and actually hunt, and they have a daily bag limit, let's say, that's their only restriction. They can hunt year round and they can hunt, but it's still a licensing process. But man, for us international people, for a non-resident individual, someone from the north coming to the south or something like that, I mean, why not have a separate system for those people? It is a valuable resource that New Zealand has. It's worth money. It's worth something like that to someone from outside. Let them come and contribute. Like I said, I would be happy. I would be happy to pay dollars to acquire a license and tag to be in New Zealand and hunt tar. Happy to do it. And I just think a lot of international folks feel the same way. That it wouldn't, I mean, I'm already spending X dollars to get there, and to do the hunt, a little bit more for a tag and license wouldn't deter me at all from coming. And then New Zealand would benefit from not just, my tourist dollars, but they would benefit from the actual tag and license sales as well for the reason I'm there. So I just think it's kind of a no-brainer. And and then the one thing that does strike me as odd, but I can see it, but I think it's hard for anyone who doesn't hunt. You have your non-hunter type. These non-hunters, they don't like to see animals shot. Right. They have a soft spot, and they like to see animals suffer or be killed. And then they want to see it done for some kind of, not just for like joy killing, but you're doing it because you want to provide, you want to eat it. You want healthy organic meat from the wild. You want to take part in where your meat comes from, that sort of thing. And when you can leave the animal behind, shoot it, grab the cape and leave, or the horns or whatever, I think that it sort of devalues that animal, not only by the hunter, but it also does it to the outside looking in. It's hard for them to look at hunting as a reasonable and viable activity when you can just leave the meat behind. So having some wanton waste, regulations against the just shooting and leaving meat, I think it's good. I think it's good to have that, because it encourages people to value that animal in more ways than just as a trophy. And then when that meat is obtained, let's say you're not a big fan of whatever meat, tar meat. I love tar meat, by the way. It's freaking amazing. Awesome. I think I'm like, because the way it smells and the way it tastes, totally different. But to me, you bring that meat home, and when my freezer's over full because I've done more hunting, that meat never goes to waste. It always goes to a family member or a friend or someone in the community. And each time that happens, it changes that person's view toward hunting. It's like I just gave a bunch of canned bear meat away to tons of friends that don't hunt and have never hunted and can't understand why I bear hunt. And they've all popped open their cans of bear meat, and they've like been blown away by how delicious it is. And now they have a much better understanding why I like bear hunting. And I think that connection to the food is vital. It's important. And so having a process in the country where you actually require people at least to salvage backstraps and quarters, or some part of it, or 50% of the animal or something. I think it just down the road, it's a policy and a practice that instills in people value for the animal beyond its trophy value.
And I guess when you're talking about the non-hunters, the people that are indifferent to hunting and indifferent to where their meat comes from, that then call for, well, we've got to get rid of these because they're a pest and they're having an effect on the population. Without, and it goes back to the economics of it, without a market for tar meat, we've got a wild animal recovery organisation here, which when the venison market's doing well, which it is at the moment, they take the animals off the hill. But when there's nothing for tar meat, they just leave them there. And that again goes back to that awareness. It's like, well, we've placed no value on this. We've got no established market for this, and this is the reality of what happens. And then that indifference goes, well, where do we go with this then? And for the sake of our original ecology, which you say, it's, I loved your analogy of the virgin thrown into prison because it's crass, but that is kind of what helicopter culling is. It's crass, and it's a shame. Yeah.
Well, and I see the predicament because, for example, we have a real, you do too, but we have a real pig problem here in the United States, especially down in Texas and other areas, and those pigs are destroying our countryside, and completely they're threatening ground nesting type birds and animals. And I mean, they're just and they just multiply like rats. I mean, and so we have this problem, and there is a market for them if they trap them down there in Texas, and they've been doing a lot more of that, where they try to trap these pigs or they shoot them and they drop them off at a dog food butcher place or something.
Yeah.
But any pig below a certain size has no value, because it takes too much. It's too much to butcher them and get the meat off of it. There's not enough meat there for to justify the process for what the meat is worth monetarily. And so the same is true from what I understand. Like with a stag, you can kill so many per hour, haul them out with a helicopter, and there's a certain amount of dollar worth in terms of the venison. Whereas if you fly out and shoot a bunch of tar, by the time you fly them in, and you butcher them, there's just not enough meat and monetary value from that to justify any kind of harvest.
Yeah.
And so I think, and when they're so robust and they can adapt so well. I mean, I understand the difficulty of managing tar, but at the end of the day, I do feel like, man, if you value the animal, I guess it's protein value, and that becomes part of conversation and part of life. I think that it adds a lot of validity to the hunt and the activity of hunting and the importance of it in the world today, and it makes it relevant today, not as some anachronistic activity from the past, but it's actually a very viable and reasonable thing to do in today's world. And if people are required to bring that meat home, then they're going to hunt responsibly, get the meat, bring it home, And then if they don't like it or they can't, they're going to share it. They're going to donate it to some place. They're going to find a use for it. We do it here with whitetail deer, elk, everything. I think those systems would come into place naturally over time. And I just think that, you can't have a conversation with someone who does not hunt and take the meat and the food source out of the question and then somehow convince them that it's relevant in today's world to engage in it.
Yeah, and I guess that's another challenge that hunters face, with this small minority of people pushing the vegan agenda and from environmental perspectives and all that sort of stuff. And then in the same breath, everybody's getting sick, everybody's undernourished, and it's, if we could, and I know there's a lady hunter in New Zealand she's sort of on the up with her YouTube, and I think she might be on one of our minor TV channels as well, multi television. And yeah, she's calling for hunters to share their excessive meat with impoverished societies. And I think she's from Rotorua, which has plenty of low socioeconomic people, and that's sort of the movement that she's starting, and I guess adopting from some of the models you hear about in the States. And I think, like I say, that a way to get some of the greatest nutrient dense food. It's lean, it's not that there's anything wrong with fat, but it's lean, it's packed full of iron, and we've got an anemia problem in this country, packed full of iron, vitamins, and just
I tell you what, it's funny, I'm more excited about hunting in the modern world now than I was 5 years ago as far as social acceptance goes. We still have an uphill battle ahead of us, but gosh, man, in the United States, with things like Meat Eater, the TV program hitting Netflix, being mainstream, you look at, when I posted videos or photos of bears I shot, in 2007, 8, 9, 10, I remember getting so much blowback every single time I shared it. It was like a constant battle. And now there's been so many educational shows on hunting bears. And we just published ours the other day, the 4-part bear series that we did. And we're educating people on how you cook bear and how we eat bear. And we did a podcast on canning bear meat. And we published that video, and I got, I don't know, I think more than like 2,000 comments or messages from individuals about how much they enjoyed it and how much they learned. And I got one anti-bear hunting comment. One. Years ago, that those numbers would have been completely flipped. And so, in the midst of, in Canada, they're banning the hunting of grizzly bears, and we're fighting it here, but where we're trying to implement a grizzly bear hunting season. I think that that hunting is actually kind of winning. It might be naive, but I feel like our culture and our society here in the United States is waking up to the value of being outdoors, harvesting your own food, where your food comes from. And to be honest, I think a big part of that is because, unlike places like New Zealand, what we do to our food in this country is embarrassing. It's a travesty. The GMO, the testing, the all the steroids, the genetically modified foods, the chemicals. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were like, the top 10 used foods in the US, 7 of those are banned in Canada. It's like what we do in the United States is just disgusting. And we eat this garbage, and it's killing us, and we're all unhealthy. And because in the name of economics, our FDA, they'll prove anything as long as it doesn't kill you right away. And so it's a joke. Where New Zealand, it was like, you guys have real food. I'd buy like peanut butter, and it would be peanuts. Here I'm like, peanut butter, and it's got 50 things in it. Half of them I can't pronounce. And it's like, it's not even real oil anymore. You put something else in it. There's all these industrialized seed oils being used. And I think that somewhat of our acceptance of hunting is a backlash of what we've done to our food supply, that Americans are like, that we see the value in the wild game in a way that other countries don't, because you guys haven't bastardized your food supply the way that we have. In some ways, we've actually legitimized hunting by how we raise and how we produce food. Where when I'm in New Zealand, it's like, man, you guys have some great farming practices. You have some great, you know, the way you guys, how you manage pesticides and things like that, and how you produce food. It's pretty darn clean and pretty decent, pretty on the ball. It makes hunting seem sort of something from the past, you know, that's not viable anymore. Whereas here, it's like, we got to hunt just to survive our own food supply, you know, just to, I mean, it sounds silly, but it's true. I think there's a lot of Americans who now see the value in nature's product in a way that they wouldn't have before. And so there's a whole food movement here. And that's why I say, I feel like if New Zealand were able to sort of embrace and promote the food movement that this wild game provides, that it, in the end, that is how hunting is looked at as a viable activity in today's day. And, you know, that's just one way in, and I think it's a critical component. Now, those of us who spend years and years and months out in the wild, I think there's so much more value brought to human life through the act of hunting than just the protein. But trying to communicate that and explain that to someone who doesn't spend 12 days in New Zealand Southern Alps alone, it's really tough to help them understand it, you know, help them get all those other reasons. And I can't even put a finger on all of those things. I think it's just in your DNA. It's just part of being human that unlocks when you do it. But if you don't, so the one thing that everyone seems to get though is the food, the protein part of it, you know? So I think that we should embrace that more. We should promote it more. We should make it more of our central message.
Yeah, man. And I've put up on my Instagram story my weekend sojourn, and if you looked at that, you're like, so you climbed 200 meters of elevation twice, you bush bashed, you got soaked, it was sleeting, you nearly fell down. Well, I didn't nearly fall down a cliff, but you had a sketchy ride walking down the spur and all that. Why do you do this again? You know, and actually that's the most fun. And it's the same like one of our hunts. We walked 18 Ks in a day and then spent 24 hours in a tent and then walked back out again. And it was just like, why do you do that again? Yeah, it was awesome. But and then you brought up about the bears, and I'm a big fan of the rivets. I'm sure that, you know, on your podcast. But then the uphill battle that we're facing is this censorship of images, and it can be beautifully trimmed and cut and presented backstage, and they're still getting censored. What are you getting much of that happening to your page? You know,
yeah, I've asked people to subscribe to our newsletter. Yeah. You know, go to briancall.com and subscribe to the newsletter, because when I produce a new video of a hunt like the bear series, and now we're getting ready to do the 4-part tar series, New Zealand series, it's like people who are subscribed to my YouTube, subscribe to my Facebook, my Instagram, my social media platforms, they're most likely not going to see what I post because they're being censored and restricted, especially, for instance, like, well, on every platform. So it doesn't matter if you have 100,000 people following you on YouTube. Just because they're subscribed doesn't mean they'll see anything that you put out. And the one thing that's a direct line is still email.
Yeah.
I can send an email to everyone and say, hey, new show's up, check it out. You can't do that through Instagram anymore. You can't do that through Facebook. They look at it, oh, it's hunting. Now let's not promote it through let's only let like 3% of his most hardcore audience see it, you know, and it's just, yeah, I've noticed it's not just hunting though. You know, in the United States, we're dealing right now with extreme censorship issues just with Google, YouTube, Facebook, all of that. And especially conservative voices being censored, you know, if and it's not like they target an individual and say, you know, we're going to shut down your page. They target your ideas. And so, there are people who, let's take, for example, that I'll try to choose something benign. Let's say it's smoking pot, right? And you have people who feel like it should be okay to smoke pot, and you have some people who think that it shouldn't be okay to smoke pot. And they're afraid of, the dangers of it, let's say. And so, if you put something more conservative up, like, I just don't think pot's a good idea, then there are people that look at that and go, okay, well, I don't like that idea, so we're going to restrict that message. They didn't restrict you personally, they just restricted your idea. And unfortunately, too many of the ideas are being restricted, and that's bad for the world. It's bad for the way that we have, we're able to learn and grow as a society is through open and free discourse and through freedom of speech. So allowing people to voice their opinion over here, and this group to voice their opinion over here. When you talk about abortion, there's two sides to that. There's people that are pro-life and people that are pro-choice, and we should have a free and open discussion about it. And the sad thing is we have some very, I guess, progressive voices in there that are heads of organizations like Google that are like, anytime you talk about abortion as pro-life, well, that message gets restricted, where the pro-choice message gets unfettered access to the public. And so now you're not having a free and open discourse, because one side might sway another side if they actually get together and talk about it. And so the public's arena should just be laid open. Let me talk about bears and how we eat them and how we hunt them and how we manage them. They're an all-time rise. They're no longer on the endangered species list. They're thriving. And they're having a negative impact on ungulate populations that we've restored that are now starting to crash. We've had issues with different populations of moose that are struggling. Let us increase the bear and predator harvest rate in those regions until the moose can come back. And we should be able to do these things and make these choices. But if your message is suppressed and censored right off the bat, it's hard to have anyone hear any other message that's in mainstream except the one that they want you to hear, which is that bear hunting is evil and bad and we shouldn't do it, and humans have moved way past hunting. It's like, I don't know how you can do that when you eat meat every day, how you can come to that conclusion. But yeah, I think the censorship thing is a major problem. And thankfully, I think in our country, there's a lot of voices coming out. There's a lot of hearings being had on the censorship by Twitter and Google and all of these things. Joe Rogan had Twitter on there and really took them to task on their censorship. There was a bunch of stuff just recently with Google and Facebook, and they're coming out and trying to manage that. And it's I don't know. I'm naturally an optimistic person. I'm a realist and a pragmatist, but I also kind of believe in the goodness of humanity. Otherwise, we'd already all nuked each other. So I think overall we do pretty good, because it could be a hell of a lot worse right now. And so I think in the long term, as long as people are willing to put their voice out there and fight, that your message will be heard and things will move in the right direction over time. I think that it's just a matter of time before they break up Google. It's a monopoly. Before, we broke up the phone companies back in the day, and lots of monopolies we've taken down. And I just think it's, airline industry, same thing. I think we're just at that point where, Google is king by far, and it's too much, and they're able to control what people see and hear, and that's a problem.
Yeah, and when you speak about Google, they're not just Google; they're an investment company. And when you learn that Google has an interest in this sort of health message that came out earlier in the year, the Eat Lancet, which has been debunked by many people, And then you also find out that they're involved with artificial meat, and things like Microsoft are involved with artificial meat, and you start to go, is this why when the reach of things like keto, the reach of things like hunting, the reach of things like sustainable agriculture just get disappeared into the nowhere, even though the search for them's super high. Is that the influence?
I do. I think that it's taken its toll, and then yet you still have things like Meat Eater hitting Netflix, right? Yeah. And you still have, Joe Rogan, crossing all those boundaries, through his, I don't know how many 5 million downloads a day or something. I mean, that's just a lot of people that are being influenced by alternative sources. You have stuff like, I don't know how many hunters in the United States, but each of those people bring home meat and give it to their non-hunting friends. You still have this message finding a way through. And I know for me, when I look at news, most of the news I look at, I go, fake news, kind of like President Trump does. Like, I'm kind of like, don't believe that one. I'll believe it when I get more details. Jussie Smollett being a noose around his neck. Like, I'm like, yeah, in Chicago, this is MAGA country. Like, things like that just kind of, I don't always believe it. And so I proactively go and look for news from sources I trust. And I think that despite all their censorship, there's still a lot that gets out and finds a way to the mainstream. And the mainstream, like you said, is asking for it. They actually are, going, I want to learn more about bear hunting, and they actually look around for it. I lost my lights. Hang on. Sorry about that.
No, you're right, man.
So yeah, I think I'm still optimistic. I think countries like Canada, I talked to a lot of Canadians, they're really, really frustrated right now. But I think that they're just a few years behind the US. I think that pendulum will swing.
Yeah,
maybe.
There's a bit of that going on in New Zealand, frustration, that's for sure. Depending on what community you come from, there's a lot of hope with some people, but then the things that they're hopeful for haven't happened, so it's tough.
We have problems in our own community too. When I came home from New Zealand, I got a message from some folks that were from New Zealand, primarily one gentleman who just said, "Hey, it's really I'm really disappointed in your hunt. Like, why did you? It's just disgusting that you shot such small tahr. Why didn't you shoot older tahr?" And I looked at that and I'm like, my hunt is my hunt. Yeah. The reasons I'm there may not be the same as your reasons. And the idea that I should only shoot a tahr that's, I don't know, 12, 14 inches, and that's the only acceptable course of action, or I feel like I first of all, my reasons for going there are to experience the country, the culture, to see the animal, to eat the animal. That's a huge part of it for me. Like, I want to actually harvest it and eat it and see what it's like. And in the country where we took the animal, that has more to do with it for me than the actual size of the animal. Like, if I go up into some rugged mountain range and I bring home, a small elk, that means way more to me than the one that was behind the farm, down the road here, that's 5 times as big. Like, trophy country has way more value to me than the trophy animal. And the goal is to achieve both: the oldest age class animal I can find in the most rugged country I can hunt. Like, that's the challenge I want. But I'm learning. This is my first tahr hunt, out on my own. And I thought, it's a shame that another one hunter, instead of saying, well done, that's great what you did, I love how you're promoting hunting in a positive light, I love how you've gone about this experience. Instead, it's, man, you're pathetic. You shot like baby tahr. What's wrong with you? And I don't, that sort of mentality, just that right there is exactly why people, non-hunters, have struggle with us at times.
Mm.
We don't do ourselves any favors.
No, it's yeah, back to Theodore Roosevelt. So it's the man in the arena that makes a difference, mate. How did getting the trophy out of the country? Were you able to get the meat out of the country? Was there
Yeah.
any challenges there? Like,
No. So, you know, uh, you know, the the meat thing was easy. The
Mhm.
whole thing was easy, really. Um, so we we brought all the meat back from all the tar and the chamois, and we brought all the skulls back and the hides. And um, what we did was we stayed in a hotel, and we got one with the kitchenette, and then we basically were able to boil the skulls in the hotel, just like cook a roast or whatever, you know. So except it was a skull, and we boiled it and then scraped it clean and bleached it. And it took a day, you know, of us hanging out at the hotel, and we butchered all the meat, deboned it, all that, and bagged it in gallon Ziplocs. Got it all taken care of, and then we double bagged it in some, well, basically saran wrap or plastic wrap, and we put the hides. We wrapped those up in plastic wrap, duct taped them super tight, and then we took everything to the local tavern,
Mhm.
and they were really really cool in the city we were in, and they let us just throw them in their freezer, and we just put them in some Yeti pangas because they're waterproof bags. They're not insulated. We could use an insulated bag, but that's not they're not big enough. You know, Yeti's insulated bags aren't big enough. You can bring, I think, 40 or 50 pounds of meat back in a in a in an insulated, but when it's frozen solid, it'll last a couple days. And so what we did was we threw it inside the panga, the hide and the meat, and and then threw it in the panga, threw it in the freezer a couple days before we left. So when we got it out, it was rock hard. And the skulls I just put in my checked baggage. Um, and there's no problem with any of that, because once you pull the brain matter out and it's been cooked and all that and bleached, um, there's no importation issues, because there's no live bacteria or diseases that could be spread or anything like that. So the biggest issue is, if you're coming, it was the exportation. Like the US was pretty easy about importation of the animals, the meat, the hide, the skulls. There's no real rules against importing it. There are a few issues as far as the skull and the brain matter. Outside of that, you're pretty much green lighted to come into the US. Now, leaving with an animal, the biggest issue that we had heard about that we could face is New Zealand stopping us from leaving with the animal, because some airline people don't know the rules. So the DOC has a nifty little letter that you can print out, written by the president of the DOC. I don't know what his title is. President, boss man,
Yeah.
leader. And it's basically an sort of a signed affidavit kind of thing that shows that that explains that tar are a non-CITES species, tar and chamois, that they're invasive and that they're a non-CITES species, so they don't need a CITES permit in order to be exported. So you just present that to the airline, if they ask, if they're like, wait a minute, and then they read it and they're like, oh, okay, and they let us just check the bag as luggage, and it's got to be under 70 pounds. Anything over 50 is going to cost you a little extra because it's overweight, so you got to pay an oversized bag. So my tar meat and the hide all in the Yeti panga. I checked one that was 70 pounds and another one that was like 50 pounds, and it was $200 for each bag, basically. So it's just two extra bags. So when I flew over there with 2 empty Yeti Pangas and bags inside my main bag. So when I flew back, I just chucked all the frozen stuff in there and checked it as luggage. No problem. I landed in the U.S. They were like, they wanted to look at the meat. They looked at it and they're like, yeah, cool. And then they wanted to pass the skull around to all their buddies in the in customs and check this out. This is cool. But everyone was cool with it. And so technically any airline could give you trouble because they don't know their own rules. So if you go out of your way to, to help them know their own rules and you're polite, I don't think that it's much trouble importing. So Ryan imported his separately on a different airline, different trip. He left the day after I did, Lampers. And he was my hunting partner on this trip. No problem. So, I know Remy's brought some stuff back and others have brought things back. And, it's a whole different ballgame if you're trying to bring stag antlers back. That's just not going to fit in the bag. So, yeah. But chamois and tar, not a problem.
Yeah, see plenty of the taxidermists rig up big crates to send things back, and I think that's where most guys end up doing a mount if they're having to go to that trouble anyway. They end up doing a mount and get it back.
Yeah, like what I found, because last year when I went, I paid a taxidermist to do it. I dropped it off and I ended up paying a total of $1,800 to have my to have a single tar shipped back, the hide and the skull just salted and the skull bleached, and it came over. So it was a fallow deer that my buddy Keith shot, and a tar. So a tar and a fallow ended up costing near $2,000 to have it shipped here. Versus I brought back basically 3 tar for $400. And I have it with me. I didn't have to wait like a year to get it. I didn't have to call a broker either. Like you have to have a broker, international broker, deal with 2 taxidermists, and then you got to pay the brokerage fee. Like the whole thing was a joke. So bringing it in as luggage was the way to go, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, one more thing for us to be aware of is that it with the international world that we live in now, these things are easy to do, and yeah, if you prepare, you can do it.
Well, the whole trip was like our airfare was $1,800 round trip, and then I think we paid around another shipping trophies and everything and meat and luggage. I think it was like another $600 in luggage. And then our rental car split 2 ways was about $500. And then the helicopter was about $6 a piece. So, I mean, that whole trip can be done for under $3,000 from the United States, the whole thing. There's more than enough. Like you could technically, if you're really, really, really careful and you did things like you could do that whole trip for $2,500, especially with some of the airline fees being half if you get the right time and you work that all in and stuff. So, man, I can't believe that I can do an epic, tar goat hunt, in the Southern Alps for $3,000 and experience a whole nother country and part of the world. And I can't even go do a drop camp in, my backyard for less than that for elk or mule deer. So I think a lot of guys are just afraid to travel international. The whole idea of getting a passport, getting on an airplane, going to a foreign country, driving on the wrong side of the other side of the road. I think all that stuff just intimidates people, and it shouldn't, because once you've done it a couple of times and traveled the world a bit, man, it's a cool place to experience. So I think there's a lot of New Zealand outfitters and guys that'll probably hate my guts by the time, they've heard more about, people have heard about this. But honestly, I feel like, there's people who I feel like that are in my boat who are never going to pay, ever going to pay for a guided outfitter service. And that group, that's who I'm speaking to, you know. And anybody who wants that other type of experience, they're not going to do what I just did. They're not interested. I don't think that they're the same demographics. I think there's room for us all to play together and get along just fine.
Yeah, and what was Zion's take on you guys talking with him? He was
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I really dig Zion, and he was like, he's like, look, I can either snub you, and not help you out, and not, and you're going to do it anyway. Because you got guys like Remy Warren who have paved the way and told you, I can sit here and not be helpful, or I can be helpful to something that's going to happen anyway. And he goes, frankly, I'd rather be friends than enemies. Why not? Because we both value hunting. And Zion's like, look, what I like the most is that you're a voice for hunting, and a positive voice for hunting that will just bring more value to our country and the wildlife that's here, that we should have a spotlight shined on it. Let's do that together. And yes, it might impact some of my clientele, but he's like, he's like, I agree that most likely the people who are paying me to come on a hunt aren't the guys like you that want to do it yourself experience. And he's like, who knows, down the road, maybe I'm helping guys, there's a small fee for me to help guys do, a do it yourself kind of thing. But so I think it's natural for some guides and outfitters to feel threatened by a do it yourself kind of guy and do it yourself kind of message. But at the same time, like I said, I think there's room for both groups, and we should be on the same team. We should get along.
And yeah, following the likes of Kajona or in my mates in Hawea and Zion and stuff, they seem to be doing a good job, plenty booked up, plenty of hunts done, and so yeah, I think they're doing all right. So yeah, mate, I need to get off to work. Where do people find Gritty? Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and the email, right?
Yep, and Instagram, it's just Brian_call. Yeah. And you can go to briancall.com, and you'll have links to Gritty videos and all the Gritty podcasts and stuff. I think I've got like 400 and I don't know 50, 80 episodes or something.
83 or something. That's awesome.
So it's been a while. There's a lot to go through, and I wish we had a search function on there. It's been meaning to do, like, if you want to learn about New Zealand, like, you can just type it in, but I don't have that. So unfortunately right now you just got to do it like the Rogan style and scroll through until you find titles you like. But I appreciate you having me on the podcast. It's an honor to be here and to talk about this kind of stuff. I mean, I appreciate it very much.
Likewise, mate. It's been awesome. What would you like to leave us with? A thought, a way you live your life, or even a question for people to contact you about?
Man, O'Connor, that's kind of a deep thought all of a sudden. Like, I would say something I heard recently that I really liked. When it comes to something's been on my mind when it comes to, let's say, our country here in the United States, my country with the United States, there's been a lot of, and this is the same for hunting. I think it applies to a lot of things, but Winston Churchill said something to the effect of, capitalism, Western culture or capitalism is like the worst form of government imaginable, except for all the other forms of government we have to choose from. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, because we can sit here and complain a lot about, capitalism and Western thought and society, and complain a lot about all the problems that even with hunting that's out there. There's just, we can poke holes in all of it. We can complain about some of all the stuff, but I think often that quote, it's like, well, it is the worst form of government, except all the other types of government there are. I think it is a wise way of looking at things, because we tend to revise sort of, we kind of look ungrateful at the things we have in the way they are right now, when really we should be like, yeah, it's bad, it's got its issues, but dang, it's great. We've got all these great things going for us too. And at the end of the day, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have a lot to be grateful for, both in hunting and in life and in the world. And I think we should really acknowledge that and be grateful for it. So that's it. That's all I got for you.
Awesome, man. No, it's a good thought, and there's a lot that sort of stems from that in terms of personal responsibility. So yeah, wicked, man. I'll leave our podcast there. Thank you so much again. This has been epic, and hopefully next time we're in New Zealand, we can catch up, maybe.
Wicked, absolutely. All righty.